Thursday chat. I'm Kelly Stoks, and today we have one of my very good friends, Candice Sanderson, an author of 2 books that lives down in Naples, Florida. And that's where we had originally met. And I realized she was just down the street from me. So that was such a fun discovery. And she's been here a couple of times before. So we've heard from her that she had a pretty life-altering experience in August of 2013 while she was on a 10-minute drive to work. She started receiving information that she knew was from outside of herself. She's a school psychologist. This is not something she was chasing, not something she was expecting, but something that just happened. What does this mean? And how is this going to affect my life? She then took that information and wrote 2 best-selling books. They were both on the #1 bestseller on Amazon. The first one is called The Reluctant Messenger, and the second one is The Reluctant Messenger Returns. And so she has these books, which are really great reads if you're interested in that. And then Candy, you've been doing a lot on YouTube and with podcasts as well.
Yes, I have. I think I have like 175 videos up between like 3 different YouTube channels, which is so crazy because I never would have thought I would have done anything like that. Yet it's like, oh, how did this happen?
Yeah, and I love when I was listening to somebody else's podcast the other day and I heard your name mentioned as being a guest on another podcast. And I thought, oh, I know her. I know her. This is great. So we're really honored that you've come to spend some time with us today. And I know you've got some things to share. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly, so much for having me back. And it's good to see everyone. For today, I thought I would share with you some of the skills that I've learned from the messengers that taught me how to channel. When I first began channeling, I was such a novice. I mean, I didn't even realize that's what I was doing, channeling. It wasn't something that I was trying to do. It was something that just happened. Later, I realized that was part of the formula for success, not trying. When the first message arrived, my training as a psychologist kicked in, and I became the objective observer. Now, that first message took me by surprise. I did not know what to think. Now, as a psychologist, I know that when we're presented with a novel situation, something that's never happened to us before, we don't have any files stored in our brains that tell us what to do. So we're basically operating in the dark. Here I was fumbling, no directions on how to respond. And that's when our old friend, denial, comes into play. We change the subject. We pretend it didn't happen. We don't deal with it, we deny it. And that's exactly what happened to me. I ignored that first message when I couldn't readily explain it. I had more important things to do, like getting to work an hour early. So for those who don't know about my first message, I'm going to just briefly recap it. Early one morning, I'm driving to work and I get this message about a flower. It said, a flower is at its peak when it opens, and that a flower is a flower. So taking that word flower and hyphenating it, it is a flower of energy. As the roots of the plant reach down to Mother Earth, the plant then ascends to Father Sky. It's then in this perfect alignment with Source. That's when it produces a flower. The message said that we too are like the flower. We are flowers of energy. And if we stay grounded and if we aspire to reach our goals, we'll be in that alignment so that we can meet our full potential. The message ended with this statement, let us all be flowers of energy. So now let's backtrack to denial. As soon as this message about a flower arrived, I didn't freeze. I didn't flip out. So in other words, I didn't stop this novel information that was coming from who knows where. So the energy continued to flow. Just like that flower, I allowed the message. If I had judged it, it could have stopped the message. Now, don't get me wrong. There was a part of me, definitely a part of me that judged the message, but I judged the message while it was coming in. I left a small opening for that message to enter. So as these strange words are flowing into my awareness, in the back of my mind, I am going through the DSM-5. That's the manual that we psychologists use to diagnose mental conditions. But because I didn't actively stop the message, it fully downloaded into my awareness. After the fact, I realized, there really wasn't anything negative about the message. In fact, it was, very poetic, very poignant. Since then, I've learned to really respect the information from the messengers, that wisdom that comes to me sometimes in very lyrical prose or in visions that are oftentimes more real than real life. The messengers have given me the tools so that I can view life differently. I can respond to life's challenges in a different way. I've changed. I am no longer that materialistic, data-driven psychologist. I know things now that I didn't know before. Many of my beliefs have crumbled, and it's like I've climbed out of the rubble of what had once defined who I was. I now view the world through the lens of energy, and that has had a profound impact on me. In fact, in my first book, I begin with a quote from Nikola Tesla, and these words really describe my new life. He says, "If you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." What I found was when you do that, it takes the woo-woo out of many of these experiences. It doesn't mean that they're not mystical. It only means that we can use the vibrations and frequencies of energy to explain what we once thought of as magical, as supernatural. In other words, we begin to quantify the paranormal. And as a psychologist, that sat very well with me. Learning to experience the world through the filter of energy gave me a new skill set. Energy is subtle, but I can sense the connection between all living things, not just people. I can see and feel the vibrations between plants, animals, minerals. But you take things to a new level when you begin to perceive the vibrations of emotions and thoughts. You experience the truth behind many of the mysteries in life. You see, because you can literally understand, because you're seeing it, how your thoughts convey more than what your words do. Words often hide the feelings, while the frequencies behind the thoughts only speak truth. For example, if you have a harsh thought towards someone, you witness how those thoughts radiate from your center and affect everyone around you. Now, I'm sure, like me, you've had one of those days when as soon as you get up in the morning, things go wrong. If you trip and stub your toe, it starts this cascade of negative energy that can affect the rest of your day. But you can prevent this. Here's how. Become the observer. Watch the energy and how it surrounds you. And if you're not able to see it yet, pretend that you do because it exists. Now, pretending is important. It's using your thoughts, and thoughts are the organizing principle behind your energy. Thoughts have their own energy. Thinking changes the surrounding energy field. Sensing energy demonstrates that we are powerful beings and we are able to manifest our lives breath by breath, thought by thought. Take time to pause when you trip getting out of bed. Stop, sit on the floor, cry, yell, grab your toe. Then 90 seconds later, move on. I'll explain the 90-second rule in just a little bit, but take a deep breath. Force a smile on your face. Send positive energy from your heart. Let it surround you, especially that injured toe. By forcing a pause, you stop the action. You're preventing that downward spiral. Even if you don't believe this, I challenge you just to try it. Again, make it up. Pretend that it works, and you'll see a difference. Bring in peace, stillness, and appreciation. You may not appreciate the pain in your toe at the moment, but you can appreciate the other 9 toes, those that don't hurt. Empower yourself to step on a different path. Be kind to yourself. Go about the rest of your day with a sense of appreciation. That will stop the pattern of pain and negativity. Just because you wake up grumpy, it doesn't mean you have to carry that baggage throughout the day. It's a choice. Is that what you really want to do? It's up to you. Now, just recently, I've been guided to use what I've learned. It's time to share with others. I still receive messages, and I often include them in the YouTube channels that Kelly mentioned. But this urge to share just keeps growing. Throughout the books, I show the readers the tools that the messengers have given me. Any one of us can use these to explore the realms of the non-physical. But first, I've got to share some basics with you. These are the foundations, not only to channeling, to much more. And these are coming directly from the messengers. These will help you connect to the realms of the non-physical. But I'm going to start with an acronym. And I'd like for you to remember it. POE. It stands for point of existence. The POE is your awareness. It's where the majority of who you are resides. For most of us, we've been programmed to believe that we are our physical bodies. Next time you're at a meeting where people go around the room and introduce themselves, I want you to notice something. For years, I've been doing this. As soon as the introductions start, I take out my pen and I start 2 columns on my notepad. And I make tally marks in each column as the people introduce themselves. When it's my time, I never say, I am Candice Sanderson. I say, my name is Candice Sanderson. And I put a tally mark in that column. I'm always in the minority. And when it's through, oftentimes I'm the only tally mark in that column. But the overwhelming number of people respond are in that other column because they say, I am, followed by their name. Think about it. It says a lot. It suggests that you think you are that body with that specific name. Instead, I know I am not my body. I, me, my true essence, my soul, my spirit, currently inhabits this body, but I am not my physical body. Now, back to the POE, the point of existence. The POE usually rests comfortably in our physical bodies, but it can move and shift at will. When you drop a hammer on your toe, your POE rushes to that spot. Your POE moves without you doing anything. The POE's movement is so natural, we don't even realize it's happening. I'm a daydreamer. I cannot tell you how many times over the years, deep in a conversation, I will hear earth to candy during a conversation. it is so obvious that I am not with them. I'm somewhere else, thinking of that chocolate souffle that I'm going to have for dessert tonight. My POE is in the future, and my mouth in the present is drooling in response. So the first consciousness awareness tool is to recognize that you have a POE. And secondly, that it moves naturally. Third, let's learn how to move it, how to control it. How do we do that? It starts with the observer. Let's look at my daydreaming example. When we daydream, our POEs are in another space in time. And although our physical bodies might be sitting across from someone in conversation, another aspect of ourselves goes elsewhere, perhaps to that chocolate souffle for tonight's dessert. But when we realize that our POE has strayed, we have just become the observer. And that is when the fun begins. We can reel our POE back to our present time, or we can just sit back and let our POE enjoy that dessert while realizing our physical form is involved in a conversation in 3D. In a sense, we've just bilocated in the 5D. But once you activate the observer, you engage your ability to send your POE wherever and whenever you please. You can throw a grappling hook into the future and bring it back to the current time, or you can revisit the past. Let's return to stumbling out of bed. As soon as you stub your toe, your POE immediately relocates to the center of your pain. You can step out of that space by consciously becoming the observer and not the person in pain. Empowerment comes when we realize we can intentionally do this. It is shifting our POE away from the physical body, in this case, our toe. And when we do that, we change its form. The energy pattern of the POE, like in quantum mechanics, transforms from a particle, like a dot, to a wave form, to a field of energy. Let's think about that dot. Once you conceptualize your POE as a dot, it becomes a tool. When you see the dot, you've stepped beyond the dot. You've activated the observer. You've shifted your POE. You've guided that isolated dot through the optical lens of a prism, allowing it to expand into a magnificent field of energy. It opens all sorts of doors for us. As we become the observer, we have just taken our first steps into the realms of energy, a realm that some call spirit. Now, let's look how time affects our observer function. This is something I share in my first book, The Reluctant Messenger. The messengers presented a series of diagrams explaining how time works. I used to think time was linear. It moved in one direction. It was a straight line from point A to point B. And using our POE as a dot, that dot traveled along that linear path. But the messengers showed me that time is not linear. It is not a straight line. It is a curvy sine wave. Now, just last week, while taking an early morning jog, the messengers updated these diagrams, and they described the timeline as a slinky. I remember slinkies from my childhood. It's a coil of metal rings that you can either compress or stretch out. You could balance each end in your palms and shift this super springy toy from one hand to the next. I really love this analogy because it really helps to create a three-dimensional model of time. When our POEs are constricted, like they are most of the time, they appear like a very tiny dot on the slinky or on the sine wave. And from that constricted perspective, we don't see the curves. The timeline appears like it's straight. Just like when I watch a sunset across the horizon, the world seems flat, but it's only because I'm so small in comparison. However, as our POEs expand, it transforms from a dot to a sphere, a three-dimensional globe. And as this sphere will swell, it encompasses more of the timeline. We then gain a greater perspective, and we see that the Earth is not flat. We start to interact with aspects of the past and the future. Now, here's your wavy timeline, and as you expand, the greater you expand, you see that more of the timeline is encompassed. A large expansion, you can experience past lives or what might happen in the future. Whereas just a smaller expansion might allow us only a brief glimpse into next week's lotto numbers. But as we expand our POEs, all of our intuitive skills are sharpened. The messenger's description of time made sense to me. So once we know what we're doing and how we're doing it, we become empowered. We begin to take control over our lives in ways that were not possible before. How do we do this? How do we expand our POE? Although mine happened spontaneously, I can now do this at will. We can dial up our POEs. We can consciously expand that point of existence to encompass as much of that time wave, that's Kirby's time wave, as we want. We can shift that slinky from one hand to the next. I began to understand this when my visions became much more frequent and more expansive. I realized there were multiple aspects of me and that I existed on a continuum. As I would document the vision in my journal or voice it in my phone recorder, I realized I was observing me and the vision while another me documented these encounters. The visions became more detailed and more realistic when my awareness, when my POE was no longer trapped inside a body that was programmed to experience the world through the limitations of our physical senses. I discovered I could control the action. The observer me could decide when to pause and when to proceed, just like using a remote. Again, this empowered me. I was the one in charge, the observer me. The note taker was simply the bystander, documenting what the me in the vision experienced. Once your POE stretches into a field of awareness, you can use these expanded aspects of yourself to dial it up or down. Like a slider that adjusts the volume on an electronic device, you are in control. The POE starts out as that tiny dot in the physical body. And as I move the slider a bit, or turn the dial or shift the slinky, I become aware of the observer aspect of myself. That's the first step for me. I'm no longer the person known as Candice Sanderson. I become aware of the observer me. If I continue pushing that slider, more of my POE becomes the me in the vision. Now, I'm still connected to the observer, and the observer is still connected to the scribe who's frantically documenting the experience, but I am now in the vision. And this is when the me in the vision takes control. I can choose where to go. I can choose when to go within that vision. That aspect of me is now at the helm. It's no longer just the observer adjusting the dials. The me in the vision controls the dialogue. We don't see the observer, however, until our POE begins to expand. So recognizing the observer self jumpstarts the process of connecting to the non-physical dimensions. From there, it's a matter of practice, shifting, phasing, cranking up that POE into an expansive field that's ready for us to explore this beautiful world of the non-physical. Now, let's go back to that scenario of falling out of bed. It's hard to engage the observer aspect when you're in pain. Enter that 90-second rule I mentioned earlier. You've stubbed your toe. You're wondering, how could something so small create so much pain? How can you find your observer when you're rolling on the floor in misery? In a book called My Stroke of Insight, author and neuroscientist Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, she explains how our neurological systems are designed for survival. When we're confronted with something, we have an automatic fight or flight response. And these responses are deeply embedded and programmed in our biology. In days gone by, if a saber-toothed tiger confronted a caveman, unless he immediately responded, he was the tiger's next meal. With that example, the caveman's body is absolutely flooded with hormones when he confronts the tiger. There's adrenaline and cortisol, and as it goes through his system, that's what initiates this survival response. But did you know that within 90 seconds, that hormonal rush is gone? It has completely left our biological system. What does that tell us? It says that any reaction we have after 90 seconds is a choice. Let that sink in. We can choose to relive the experience, the confrontation with the saber-toothed tiger, the argument with your spouse, your boss firing you, the loss of a loved one, dropping the hammer on your toe. There's a biological reason for that initial response. So give yourself 90 seconds to feel the pain, the agony. Use that time to grab a bag of ice for your toe. Then let it go, release it. Pain is part of the human experience, but choosing to carry that baggage, suffering, is a choice. Bring in the intelligence of your POE. Take a deep breath and choose a different path. As you bring in love and gratitude and serenity, those higher vibrations, your POE automatically expands. Then look around. That's when you can find your observer. Finding the observer causes a break in the action. You realize you are in control. You can change the dialogue and decide whether you want to carry this event through the rest of the day or the rest of your life. You see, if we let them, our brains will relive these experiences. Each time we think about them, that hormonal rush starts all over again. Our heart pounds, our breath quickens, our blood pressures rise. Our brains don't know the difference between pain and perceived pain. And before you know it, we're in this never-ending loop of the 90-second rule over and over. But knowing that your body legitimately reacts only once was key in changing my life. I have the choice. I can take a deep breath, call on my observer to come to my awareness. If she's not there on the surface, I force a smile to bring in higher vibrations. That smile is the prism that expands that isolated dot into a field of beautiful colors. It allows the observer access and much more. So these are the basics for me in connecting with the realms of the non-physical, expanding your POE. And once you're in that state of expansion, we're in a position to recognize the subtle energies of spirit. Don't seek it. Don't search for it. Instead, surrender to it. Allow these divine energies to flow into your awareness. Expand. Be a light. Become a beacon of goodness. Listen with your heart. Don't judge the information. Allow it and give thanks. And once you've tapped into those divine energy frequencies, keep it flowing. Be that flower, that flower of energy, so that you can embark on these adventures that's waiting for you in these non-physical realms. They exist just a breath away. So thank you, Kelly.
Wow, that was just really great, Candice. And I always love how you can relate this back to science, because this is quantum physics with the field and how we are all one energy. And this is not woo-woo stuff. This is
Right.
this is really, what's there. So it was really fascinating. Let's go ahead and see if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask. Jeanette.
Thank you. First of all, Candice, thank you so much for being here. We had our conversation on last Friday, and then today is the 7th. So again, 7.
Oh, Jeanette,
so
can you share with everybody briefly how we met just last week? It was fascinating, and it was a wonderful example of how energy works and how spirit works.
and
Well, I'll start off.
okay.
Jeanette sent me a request to be a friend on Facebook, and normally I just like check, and then I thought, wait a minute, I don't know her, but for some reason, and I've never done this before, I felt like I needed to contact her. So I contacted her and said, how do I know you? And she responded back, and this opened up this beautiful conversation where we were texting. I've told some of it. You can tell more or go on with your question.
And
but
they continue, Candice, because this weekend I picked up a bouquet of flowers, and I kept saying I've never seen flowers like these. And then reading your book, I started reading your book, and it starts with the whole, the message about the flower. And then last Friday, I'm really into numbers, and I was like 10, 1, 20, 21, that adds up to 7. That's my favorite number. It's going to be a great day. And that's when I met you. And then today I was looking at my calendar, and I'm like, I'm going to be able to see Candice again. And it's October 7th. So it's like, it just doesn't stop. It's so cool. But thank you so much for this message. And I was just curious, when you talk about the point of existence, is that what we've referred to as like our soul? Is that kind of like our soul, or is it different?
it's different. The POE, and I know this is different for everybody because I've never heard of a point of existence. This is what the messengers have told me. But the point of existence is where your awareness is. It's typically in the body, and it likes to stay. It's very comfortable being right there. As you expand and you become this beautiful field of energy, then you can access parts of your spirit, your essence, your true, your consciousness, your true nature. But in its very constricted form, we think it is just us. We think it is Candice Sanderson. So depending on whether it is in that isolated form or whether it's expanded, it is who and where you think you are. It is your awareness.
And then you talked about, how we see time, and I hear often be in the present moment. So are you saying that we have to kind of let go of that, also that version of time of being in the present moment with this whole expansion?
Okay, what a great question. And so information is coming to me right now. What I'm hearing is being in the present moment means, living through your heart space. So being in the present moment doesn't equate with being in 3D and only using your current senses. It means moving your energy to your heart space, because your heart is a portal to that field of energy that surrounds us. So the best way to be in the present is to be living through your heart. When we're born, we don't have those higher skills of language. And so we're using our instinct, we're using our heart in order to survive. Think about an animal, a bear, when it's time to hibernate. They don't get out their little daytimers and say, okay, it's time to hibernate. They just go with the flow. They go with however they are guided to do whatever it is they need to do to prepare to hibernate. When we developed language, what happened is our center of awareness, our self, we moved to those supposedly higher skills, those abstract skills of being able to analyze things. This is where I was becoming a psychologist. Everything was in my headspace. But the messengers say it's time to, I mean, your brain's great. You know, we use it, we want it to continue to function. But when you have something that's really important, remember to bring that energy back to your heart, to the present moment, and let that guidance from your heart, because that's what connects us to true soul and spirit. Let that guidance, that instinctual guidance, help light the way for you.
Thank you so much.
Great questions, Jeanette. Thank you. And let's go to Lucy.
Hi, thank you very much. Candy, from your initial message that you received, which was flower/flower, on the surface, it seems like a very innocent, simple message. So how did you get from something like that to where you progressed?
Good question. You know, it was a very simple message, but it was so poetic, and it was using words and language that I didn't use. I didn't even use words like Mother Earth back then, certainly not Father Sky and connection to source. But it made me realize whatever this was, I knew it was not coming from me. So that was key. Whatever this is, someone else, something else is sending me this message. Now, you know, denial came in. It's like, oh, you know, let's just get to work, you know, an hour early. I get to work and I'm, you know, unload my stuff from the car. I'm walking toward my office. And all of a sudden I am called to this beautiful Royal Poinciana tree. Now, I had passed this tree 100 times before. It's a tree, right? It didn't mean anything. This time it was different. And I ended up having, I guess, one of the first mystical experiences I've ever had with this Royal Poinciana tree. I stepped back and looked at it and I communicated with it. And I knew it was as alive as I was. So it made me, oh, at the very end of this experience, I was guided to look at this one little bud that had not yet flowered. And it made me realize that bud represented me. It represented us, potential, just waiting to bloom. So that then took all the message that I had just gotten on my drive to work. It shined a different light on that. And I began to realize how significant that was. And when I experienced this with the tree, I then went into my office and I realized, well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had taken my first steps into the world of the unknown, the world of spirit. And then the floodgates just opened. A few days later, I started getting messages from people who had passed away, and they had messages that I needed to share with others. So I did. And then I had messages from star systems. It's like, what? I mean, you've got to realize I was a psychologist and I trusted anything and everything that I could measure with my senses. If I could not hear it, feel it, taste it, smell it, or whatever others hear it, I don't know, whatever sense I see it left out, it didn't exist in my world. So gradually, message by message, I allowed the information to flow. So that kept it going. I would start researching what I documented. And all of these things that I knew nothing about, I was finding out that, oh, there really is something called this. I mean, the information just opened up all these doors to me that over time, I began to realize how significant they were. and that there was a force much greater than myself that was behind this and guiding it. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yes, it does. It sounds like you had a divine intervention somewhere in there, because like you said, you could have just ignored the message, but on your way into the building, you had another interception. So, I mean, that's profound. Instead of it just conjuring in your mind, somebody was helping you.
Right. And I mean, now I have so many messengers that I connect with, and now I can just hear them. I'm sure they said, she didn't get it. She didn't get the message with the flower. Quick, bring in the tree, bring in the Royal Poinciana tree, because I could not ignore what happened after that. I mean, that was a life-altering vision for me. It was beautiful. But it started off with me allowing the information to flow. It's not something that I was seeking, but being able to step back and being the objective observer just left enough of that door cracked open so the energy could continue to flow. I like to think of energy, it's similar to water in a hose. When you first start, like turn on a garden hose, it might be crimped and it's not going to flow. But as the water starts to drip through, that crimp smooths out and more information comes. It's the same way with energy from the non-physical. Once you allow a few drips to come through, be open, allow more, and you'll get more. Now, I always protect myself. I always use higher vibrational energies. I always, I'll circle enclose myself in a bubble of light. I'll use prayer. I didn't do that then. I was just driving to work. I do that now. And if anything has ever come to me that didn't feel right, the messengers even showed me, you can just imagine that as a bubble and just blow it away. That there are ways that you can keep energies away from your field. So I've kind of learned how to navigate, at least for me, this realm of energy. And it's been fascinating. I love it. But as a psychologist, I never thought I would be saying this, much less write 2 books about it.
Thanks for the question, Lucy. And Candice, thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate your time. And Candice has a website, CandiceSanderson.com. And on there, you can find where the links to the podcasts and where she's been interviewed. And I'll go ahead and post a recording of this in the Let's Chat Facebook group, along with those links as well. And I know we have some new people here today, and we're really glad that you came to join us. So thanks everybody for coming. I love seeing you all here. And Candice, thank you so much. And I'll be seeing you in the next couple months or so.
Great. Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Bye, everybody.